Today we have Miss Happiness and Miss Flower, Chapter 3. Miss Flower could not help being anxious about the house. Will Miss Nona know that a Japanese house should have walls that slide open like windows? Paper windows, said Miss Happiness. That it should have a little garden to look at, said Miss Flower. Does she know about quilts, not beds? Chopsticks, not spoons and forks? Cushions, not chairs? You know she knows about cushions, said Miss Happiness. But bowls, not cups? Hush, she is studying. Miss Flower tried to hush, but she could not help a small whisper. It takes so long to study. If we could tell her. We can't. What can we do for Honorable Miss? We can wish, said Miss Happiness. And they wished. Perhaps Belinda felt the wishing more than Nona, for... Is she going on reading forever? Asked Belinda. It really seemed as if Nona would go on reading forever, but one snowy afternoon Mr. Twilfit knocked at the door. He had brought a book. Not another book, said Belinda. Hush, Belinda, said Mother. And Mother asked Mr. Twilfit to come into the drawing room where they all were, but Belinda would not hush. She has read and read, said Belinda, and she still does not know how to make a Japanese house. I do know, said Nona, and they all looked at her. Well, how? I don't exactly know how, but I know what it should be like. Well, Miss Happiness and Miss Flower, who had been brought down on their cushions, held their breaths. Japanese houses are up off the ground, began Nona, so the house should stand on stilts or up on a box, I thought, with a little wooden steps. Some of the walls should be plain, but the other walls should slide like windows. They should be rather like picture frames, but with plain paper crisscrossed with wood. Some of the inside walls should slide too, but they are plain. Yes, breathed Miss Happiness and Miss Flower. The roof should be tiles, dark blue or gray. Yes, yes. Inside there should be a little hall for taking off shoes. Japanese people don't wear shoes in the house. The room should be almost empty, with matting on the floor. If we could get it fine enough, said Nona. Lots of homes nowadays do have chairs and sofas and beds, but most still have cushions to sit on, and they would have cupboards with sliding doors, or else chests where they keep rolled-up quilts or mats for beds. Yes, said Miss Happiness and Miss Flower. They would have a firebox. I don't know exactly yet what that is. And in all the rooms there should always be a niche, an alcove for a scroll. That's a Japanese picture. And by it a vase of flowers. Very few flowers, said Nona. Yes, yes, cried Miss Happiness and Miss Flower, and bravo, said Mr. Twilfit. Nothing else? Asked Belinda. No tables or chairs? A very little table, just off the floor. It will look very bare. Japanese houses are bare. That is their beauty, said Mr. Twilfit, and his eyebrows worked up and down as he looked at Nona. You'll see, said Mr. Twilfit. It will be all right once you have got the bones. Do houses have bones? Nona and Belinda asked him together. The foundations, the floors, walls, and roofs are the bones. How will you get those, hey? Asked Mr. Twilfit. They could be carpentered, said Nona. You can't carpenter, said Belinda. No, but once again they all looked at Nona. Tom can, said Nona with a rush. I don't make girls' things, said Tom. Of course they are more difficult and delicate, said Mr. Twilfit, and he asked Mother, was it Sir Winston Churchill or the President of the United States who made that beautiful doll's house for his sister? I don't believe they did, growled Tom under his breath. And of course, said Mr. Twilfit, his eyebrows were busy, you would need to be a really good carpenter. I'm making a model galleon, said Tom. And that's horribly difficult, said the loyal Belinda, but Mr. Twilfit shook his head. That's a model from a plan, he said. Quite simple. You only have to follow it. A Japanese doll's house wouldn't have a plan. I don't suppose anyone has made one. Not in this country. The plan would have to come out of your own head. A boy could hardly be expected to do that. I don't see why not, said Tom, but Mr. Twilfit still shook his head. How would you raise it? Make a plinth, said Tom, like a box upside down, he explained quickly to Belinda before she could ask him what a plinth was. Then the grooves for the sliding walls, they would have to be so very small. I could make them, growled Tom. And the frames to hold the paper screens for a doll's house, they would have to be so very thin. How could you join them? I could, growled Tom, but Mr. Twilfit still shook his head.
It would be very difficult. And he stood up to go. He said to Nona, "You had better save up and we'll see if we can find a proper carpenter." Tom scowled at Mr. Twilfit. Scowl is a face you make when you dislike someone, and spoke across him to Nona. "I'll make it for you," said Tom, and under his breath he said to Mr. Twilfit, "You'll see." "Nona, would this box be big enough? Nona, if I make this 2 feet long, would this paper be thick enough for the screens? Nona, I found this shell." A strange thing had happened. Suddenly, it was as if everyone in the house were helping to make the Japanese dollhouse. "Everyone except me," said Belinda. "I won't help." Perhaps it was Nona's reading aloud, or Mr. Twilfit's interest, or the plan that Tom had drawn from the pictures in the books, or because of our wishing, said Miss Happiness and Miss Flower. But all the family seemed to be running backwards and forwards to Nona, asking Nona questions, bringing things to Nona. "Except me," said Belinda, and kicked the table. "Belinda, you're not jealous of Nona." "Of course I'm not jealous," said Belinda scornfully. "I'm not even interested in Japanese dolls." That was not quite true. She very often thought about little Peach. He would have been like Peach Boy in the story, thought Belinda. To think about him took away the feeling that Belinda was beginning to have, a feeling of being left out. "I wish little Peach had come," said Belinda. It's the end of chapter 3.